Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Mr Chair, there was a reasonable amount in what the Minister was just speaking about that I agreed with. I agreed with many of her concerns around the students who aren't currently achieving within our education system, and I think that is something that I hope all sides of the House and all people in the House will be concerned about. I want to see our education system delivering for every student in New Zealand. But there were also things in that speech that I'm sure you won't be surprised to learn I didn't agree with the Minister on. And I think fundamentally, if we go right to the very beginning, I don't believe that a government declaring war on the teaching profession is the best way to improve outcomes in education. Because make no mistake, that's what this government have done. We've had a government with 2 ministers of education now who have repeatedly questioned the competence, the professionalism and the dedication of New Zealand's teaching profession. That's right. I do not believe there is any teacher anywhere in this country that gets out of bed in the morning and goes off to school and thinks, how can I do my job really badly today? Every teacher in this country is there because they want to improve the lives of young New Zealanders, and they deserve our thanks for that, and they deserve our praise for that. And yes, there are some gaps in the system. Quite often, it's actually the system that lets the teachers and the kids down, not the other way around. It's not the teachers who are letting the system down, it's the system who are letting the teachers and the kids down, and we should be focused on making sure that we deal with those issues. And simply putting labels on teaching and on the kids who aren't achieving in the education system will not do that. So, Hekia Parata mentioned in her speech that every level of achievement has gone up under the current government. Well, only the ones that they're measuring, and it's a very narrow range of ones that they're measuring. How have kids' problem-solving abilities improved under this government? There's nothing. There's nothing because they don't measure that, because it's actually hard to measure. How have their interpersonal skills improved under this government? Again, nothing, absolutely nothing, because there's no measurement for that. But those are the things that are going on in our classrooms every day. Good teachers aren't just teaching literacy and numeracy, those are very important. They are also teaching the kids all of those other vital, really valuable life skills that they're going to need to prosper and to succeed in their lives. And because they're not measured, this government are saying to those teachers and to those schools, those things don't matter. Well, I think they do matter. They absolutely, in fact, they're critical, because if we want to turn out kids from our school system who are going to be full contributing members of society, who are going to be useful employees to future employers, those are the sorts of skills they're going to have. And they're very difficult to measure. But actually, when you talk to employers, if we take NCEA, for example, and the government have set a target around NCEA level 2, it's difficult to disagree with the target that they've set. But if we talk to an employer, and you say, what sorts of things do you look for in a student, in a graduate coming out of school? They will talk about their level of qualifications, but they'll talk about, are they going to show up on time? Are they going to be polite and courteous? Are they going to respect the authority of the person who they're working for? Are they going to be creative? Are they going to be able to problem solve? Are they going to get on well with the other employees? Those are the things that employers will be asking of their future employees. And we don't measure that in the school system at all. But that's actually where the kids are developing those skills. That's, well, so many of the things that go on in our schools aren't measured, and we shouldn't focus on managing only what we can measure. We've got to actually have a school system that embraces all of those other things and that says, yes, we recognise that those things are vitally important and that they are also going to have a significant impact on a child or a student's future in this country, and yet this government say those things don't matter, and I think that they are totally and utterly wrong with regard to that. So when we talk about education, our question has to be not how do we deal with this particular set of statistics. What we've got to ask ourselves is, how do we make sure that every New Zealander, not just the kids who are at school, but every New Zealander, how do we make sure that they have the opportunity through education to reach their full potential in life and contribute fully to the society in which they live? Because it's not just kids in school. In fact, we need to be thinking about lifelong learning opportunities and vitally second chance learning opportunities for those who didn't do well in schooling in the first place, who may not have made it all the way through the schooling system and have found themselves, really struggling now and needing that second chance at learning. We've got to be focused on them as well. And a good school system will be able to cater for those people. And yet this government have cut all the funding to night classes. Now, they say that they were hobby courses. Well, actually, Mr Chair,
Chris Hipkins.
For many people, they were actually a foot back in the door to education again, got them back on the pathway to learning more. And maybe it did start as a hobby, but for many people, it then went on to something else. And for many people, what we might look at as a hobby is actually the beginning of a new vocational opportunity for some of those people. And I think it's really tragic that the government have cut that. If we look at the quality of teaching, and I heard Hikia Parata mention several times how she felt that, teaching in school, quality teaching was the biggest in-school determinant of student achievement. I absolutely agree with that. That's very clear that that's what the research says. So we do have to look at teacher professional development, and we have a very, very successful teacher professional development program, or had a very successful teacher professional development program in New Zealand, targeted exactly at those students who haven't been achieving in our system, and it was called Te Kotahitanga, and the government have cut it. They've cut the funding for it because it was too expensive, and they've come up with something that's cheaper. That's how they penny pinch. They came up with something that was cheaper. Actually, what we should be saying is, this is a really successful program. It's working really well. It's achieving what we want it to achieve, and the long-term investment is much, much more valuable to us. So we're going to put more money into programs that work rather than simply penny pinching and cutting them. And Hikia Parata, when she talked about quality teaching, also neglected to mention the fact that in charter schools aren't going to have to employ fully qualified and registered teachers. And in question time today, Hikia Parata made the comment that there's a difference between unqualified and unregistered. Now, if that is the case, what's the point of teacher registration in the first place? We have teacher registration because it certifies that somebody is fit to be in a classroom. It certifies the fact that not only do they have knowledge of the subject, but they have knowledge about how to impart that subject knowledge onto other learners, and that's vitally important. People can be experts in their trade or in their profession. It doesn't mean they know how to pass that knowledge on to somebody else. There is an art to teaching that we should make sure that the people we're putting in our classrooms actually understand and actually know how to do. And that's what teacher registration is about. It's also about making sure that the people in our classrooms are appropriate people to be there. So there are safety checks in there to make sure we're not putting people in front of kids who are often in very vulnerable positions who shouldn't be in classrooms. That's what teacher registration is designed to achieve. So I think it's wrong that the government is saying we don't think that teachers working in charter schools should be registered. Of course they should be registered. Every teacher working in a school should be registered. And I hope that we can get back to the point where we have a goal that every teacher working in an early childhood centre should be registered as well, because that was what the Labour government was working towards. The National government have backed away from that, and I think that was the wrong decision, because we should be focused on raising the standard of teaching in New Zealand, and that means a focus on a qualified, registered teaching profession. So, coming back to the issue of charter schools, the Labour Party has been very clear. We don't see the need for charter schools, and in fact we see many, many detrimental elements to the current charter schools model that this government have put forward. They won't have to employ qualified teachers. They won't be subject to the same levels of public scrutiny as state schools are. They won't be subject to the Official Information Act or the Ombudsman's Act, for example. They won't have to teach to the New Zealand curriculum, and yet our curriculum is recognised around the world as being an absolute leader. And yet these charter schools that the government are setting up won't have to teach to it. So we've made it very clear, we don't see a future for charter schools. We've already got enough schools in New Zealand now. What we should be focused on is making sure that every one of those schools that we have now is one of the best possible schools we could have. That every teacher working in them is a member of a valued and collaborative teaching profession that is constantly striving for ongoing improvement, and we will get that by having a partnership between government and teachers and parents and communities, not by dividing and conquering as this government seeks to do. Driving a wedge between teachers and parents has been one of the most divisive things that this government could possibly have done, and that is exactly what they've been focused on doing. I do trust our teachers. I do believe that they go into school every day wanting to make a difference for students. Yes, I accept that in some cases some teachers could be better. All of the teachers that I speak to want to be better. Even the really, really good ones want to be better. They are looking for ways to be better, and they're saying, well, if you want us to be better, why don't you invest in our professional development? Why don't you actually support us to be better teachers? And I think that's a very, very reasonable thing for them to ask of a government. That the government doesn't label them, government supports them, because we've got to work with teachers, not declare war on them like this government if we want educational outcomes to improve.
The question is that vote education stand part of the schedules. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The question now is that vote education review office stand part of the schedules. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The question is that vote Pacific Island affairs stand part of the schedules. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The question is that vote arts, culture and heritage stand part of the schedules.
They've got no questions.
Is anyone speaking on this? No. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The question is that vote Attorney General stand part of the schedules. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The question is that vote Parliamentary Council stand part of the schedules. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The question is that vote treaty negotiations stand part of the schedules. The Honourable Tauhanari.
I want to be placed on record